Okay, so are we ready? Okay, I'd like to call to order the Economic Development and Housing Commission for our meeting for the September 16th. So good evening and welcome. This is a special meeting of the Economic Development and Housing Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter, along with the request to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that the request to speak card should be completed and turned in to the clerk. If you wish to speak to the commission regarding any item on tonight's agenda, please write the item number on the card. If you wish to speak on the items not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please do so during the general administration section of tonight's agenda. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. Commissioners, let's have the pledge. Commissioner White, would you like to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Laurel, would you like to do a roll call?
Michael Brady.
Present.
Rachel Gregg. Nicholas Esquivel.
Present.
Lynn Lee. Ron Price.
Present.
Veronica Smith.
Present.
Chris White.
Present.
Mark Campbell.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have are there any cards? No one's filled out a card for us. Okay, so we may I have a motion to approve the minutes from July 22nd?
I move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are adopted from the July 22nd meeting. Okay, so presentations. We have a presentation on the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG program, operated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. And we have Ms. Collis presenting.
Good evening. The last time I was before this commission, we gave a short overview of, of housing activities that have been promoted by the city over the past number of years. And probably showed if you'll recall, there were hundreds and hundreds of units. I believe we have something like 1,400 affordable units in the city, in addition to programs that are like our first-time homebuyer program and that sort of thing. So tonight we're here to talk about one particular funding source. It's primarily used for housing and economic development activities, and it's called Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG for short. The reason we're going to focus on that is that this is going to be kind of a busy year for our CDBG program. The city has received official notice from HUD that we have now hit 50,000 according to the U.S. Census as in population, which means we no longer go through the state CDBG program for our CDBG funding, which is a competitive. We have to write a grant application and be competitive. But we will become a CDBG entitlement city starting with fiscal year 16-17, so July 1st, 2016. Entitlement cities get their CDBG money directly from HUD and have a lot more control over what they want to fund. We don't have to be competitive. We have to, based on the state's criteria, we can look at what are important in our community, our community's needs, and address those. So this commission we're hoping will be a great help as we do the HUD-required planning process as in anticipation of that entitlement status. Okay, not that one. There we go. At the HUD level, CDBG was created to fund a number of different types of community development needs. And the primary objective from HUD's point of view is to use these funds to develop viable urban communities through decent and affordable housing, improving the living environment, and expanding economic opportunities for our lower income households. Now when you use the funds, that's what HUD requires you to use them towards. But that's very, very broad. Oops. Okay, go back to, because I can't seem to get it. It's like double clicking on me. Thank you. When I talk about low income households, HUD requires that we use the county income limits based on census information. So in Yolo County, that bottom line that says 80%, that's families at 80% or below of median income. So those would be the maximum income limits for households that would be eligible for CDBG funded activities. So for example, a family of 4, the maximum income is $57,750. Now sometimes we choose to do activities that assist people at the far lower income level of the spectrum. So we often have activities that are funding at the 50% level or the 30% level. Okay, now it's going backwards for me. Sorry. I've never had trouble with this thing before. Maybe this is a new one. Okay, thank you. As I said, CDBG can be used for a broad range of activities. Basically what happened is decades ago, HUD had a number of different funding programs. And they decided that it was very duplicative, and so they decided to put them all into one, and they called it a block grant. They just give you this money, and you decide which of these are important in your community. So examples of allowable activities for CDBG include affordable housing, although you'll note there you can do acquisition and rehab, you can do infrastructure for new housing, but you cannot use CDBG for construction portion of new housing. In other words, CDBG is supposed to improve the existing neighborhood and not go out and create new neighborhoods traditionally. That's the original intent. Public facilities like parks, medical services, child care facilities, homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters are often funded with CDBG, but it can also be used for public infrastructure, street, sewer improvements. And then there's a category called public services, which is limited to no more than 15% of your funds each year, or of your expenditures each year. So those are any type of services that are being primarily benefiting low-income residents. So oftentimes youth and senior activities are funded, homeless services, services for the disabled. It can also be used for education and job training type programs. And the last two activities are what HUD calls special economic development activities. So business loans, which the city has done off and on through the years. Business loans usually are for job creation. You have to create a certain number of jobs, and they have to be A certain number of those have to go to low-income households. So it's not always a good fit for a lot of businesses. Business has to be expanding or a new one opening up, creating jobs, and they have to be jobs that are going to be typically fulfilled with low-income residents. And then the micro-enterprise section of CDBG is very, very limited. So the business owners have to be under the CDBG low-income limit, that 80% limit, and they can't have more than 5 employees. So basically, we're talking, home-based businesses or very tiny, small restaurants or shops or things in general. Here in West Sacramento, over the years, we've been very successful under the state program. The state program has a lot of limitations that we struggle with, but we have been very successful with our grant applications, so we've gotten a lot done with our CDBG funds. West Gateway Place, we had a big grand opening at the end of August. That is the new project that's being built over on the corner of Gateway and Tower Bridge Gateway, West Capitol. Thank you. The names change, and I sometimes my head is a couple years behind. This project was originally called Delta Lane because that street used to call Delta Lane. That's what I was trying to remember. As I said before, you cannot use this for construction of new housing, but you can use it for infrastructure. So the CDBG funds are providing the infrastructure for that project. Other funding is being used for the actual construction. In the past, we've done some homebuyer assistance loans, like down payment assistance loans. A big chunk of our money has gone for owner-occupied housing rehab. We have a significant number of homes on the north side of town that are ownership homes. People, they own their homes. They're not all. Significant number of those owners, though, are low income, and particularly seniors often are low income but own their home. So we have a loan program that can help them rehab their home if needed with low interest rate loans. We've done some multifamily housing rehab. Those units then, of course, have to be affordable to low income families. Right now, we're using it for our homeless outreach program. We now have an outreach worker that works. He works actually out of the police department, and also very closely with the County Department of Employment and Social Services, which some people know that as the welfare department. And he is the first point of contact when we have a homeless person that is needing some direct services. But basically, our police department used to traditionally respond to all these calls, and all they can do is put someone in jail. And they may be having a problem, but they may not be doing anything illegal. So it's not a really good solution. So our new outreach worker, he started, actually almost a year ago, has been really valuable in helping get people linked up with services. We did sewer installation in Arlington Oaks. That entire little subdivision years ago was on septic tanks that were failing, and the sewage was going directly into the river, and that was a real big problem. So we took all of those. We abandoned all of those septic tanks and put in sewer, and that was probably 2003, 2004. So 219 homes. And by the way, the value of those homes skyrocketed once we got them off of the failing septic tanks, because no one could go in and buy one of those houses because a lender will not lend on a house that doesn't have acceptable sewer. They can't. So no one could buy or sell their homes that lived there. So the values of those homes, just by using our funding to help with the installation of the sewer, jumped tremendously 6 months following the completion of that project. We've done set fair housing services. As I mentioned before, we've done business loans to a number of local businesses. Sometimes we have money available for that, and sometimes we don't. Right now, I don't have any any money associated with business loans right now available. We are currently actively starting our microenterprise program up again. Classes start the last Wednesday of the month, whatever that date is. I don't have it in front of me. And they'll be every Wednesday for 6 weeks. We have English language classes downstairs in the conference room in room 104, and Spanish language classes downstairs in room 157. Those are classes that are for those low-income, very small business owners. They teach them what it means to start a business, how to develop a business plan, what kind of financial records are helpful, how to look at a financial statement and really get information about your business out of it instead of just handing it off to some tax person, just really knowing how to use it for planning purposes. It's a really helpful course. And the City Council just now approved the use of funding for Bright Park, up where the Kaboom playground is. We're going to do some additional improvements up there to really make that a wonderful area for families. Oh, thank you. So the reason I am giving you all this spiel, when you become an entitlement city, a federally funded CDBG city, the HUD requires that you go through a fairly in-depth planning process because they want to make sure that the CDBG funds are used in the way HUD has intended, specifically to improve the lives of the lower income residents and improve the situation of the low income neighborhoods in your community. And they want a lot of community engagement so that the people that live in those neighborhoods have a voice in that planning process. And we are hoping that this commission will also act as a voice for our community. So the first thing we'll be developing, there's 3 documents that HUD will require. The first is the Citizen Participation Plan, which is just basically a document that says, okay, within the HUD rules for citizen participation, here's what we're going to do in West Sacramento. So we've just started working with HUD on that. The second is the biggie. It's called a consolidated plan. This is a 5-year plan. Starts with an analysis of the resources that are available in your community and the needs and how those are matched up, so you can see where CDBG can be most effective, filling gaps that might exist. The consolidated plan is called consolidated because it's not just supposed to totally look at CDBG funds. It's supposed to look at a broad range of resources available within your community. And if we were a larger city, it would actually, in addition to CDBG, there's 3 other block grant programs. So there'd be other funding sources that would be associated with this plan, but we're just getting the CDBG money. However, we're still required to say, okay, here's a need for mental health services. Well, what nonprofits and what county programs are already available, and are there segments that aren't being addressed, for example. And then the consolidated plan is a 5-year plan, and it will have 5-year goals. It will say over a 5-year period, here's what we want to accomplish with our CDBG funding we're receiving. Within the context of that 5-year plan, each year we are required to create an annual action plan that says, okay, you got 5-year goals. This year we've got this much money and we're going to accomplish goals 1 through 3 or 2 through 7, whatever. So this year we'll be working on an annual action plan for fiscal year 2016-17. So this is a CDBG planning schedule. So you can get a general idea of what I'm talking about and how the commission will be a piece of this, very important piece of this. And please don't hold me to exact dates, but this is the current plan, and we're really going to try and adhere to it as closely as possible. Starting out, as I said, with the Citizen Participation Plan. And then in October, we'll be doing outreach meetings with HPAC, which is the Yolo County Homeless and Poverty Action Coalition. Most of the larger nonprofits that deal with persons in poverty are members of the HPAC. There may be a few additional organizations we meet with too, but those are kind of some of the larger ones, and the ones, especially the ones that receive HUD funding for things like homeless and domestic violence shelter and that sort of thing. We will be required to meet with low-income community members, so there's got to be some outreach into the older, less affluent neighborhoods. And also, we will be talking to the business community because community development needs encompass also economic development activities. So that will be in the fall, followed by, we take that information and we'll put it into our needs analysis. And that document, the draft of needs analysis and resources will definitely be coming to the commission for your review. And one thing we're hoping for tonight is if you have any other comments about other organizations or groups that you would like to see us address during the outreach component, we'd love to hear from you on that. CDBG requires 2 official public hearings. So the first one we're going to try and do in December before the City Council, because we'll need to have one to adopt the Citizen Participation Plan, and also as a public notice to everybody in general that funding will be available next year in case they have activities that they feel should be considered. And hopefully have the draft plans to the commission by March. So we'll be working really heavily in January and February on those documents at the staff level. There is a required 30-day public comment period, and then we can have our second public hearing where the drafts will go to the City Council for approval. And all of this is due to HUD by May 15th. 45 days before the start of our grant period, and so it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but hopefully we have already started on portions of this. 2 years ago, we did a homeless study that included a in-depth analysis of homeless issues and issues of persons in poverty in West Sacramento. So we'll be able to pull information from that and continue forward with that, the needs analysis that we had from that study. Last year we did a study of the Washington neighborhood, which is one of the lowest income communities in West Sacramento, and a neighborhood that's kind of on a transition period, getting ready to change with everything that's going on directly across the river with the arena. So I think those 2 documents are going to be pulled into this consolidated plan, and hopefully we'll get all this done on time, because it's quite a task. Things to consider when we're working on the consolidated plan and where CDBG funds should fit into the overall scheme of the city. First of all is to remember that HUD is looking for impact versus a scattershot approach. I have seen in some cities in the past where they just want to give a little bit of money to everybody, and it doesn't always have an impact. It doesn't make a change in a neighborhood, or it doesn't make a significant change for a particular population of people. So HUD prefers to see an impact. So when you have that 5-year goal, there should be a change at the end of that 5-year period, something that can be measured and identified. As I mentioned before, we did the Washington study, and we identified a number of infrastructure and housing needs in that neighborhood directly related to the low-income folks that live there. So I think those are going to be a part of this analysis. CDBG, according to HUD, should be considered funding of last resort. So we're required to make sure there's no other funding available for a particular activity before we go to CDBG. We're really not supposed to go there first. And they have to be used in a timely manner. We'll have certain due dates where we have to have a certain number of money spent. So we also need to look at timing issues. It might be a really great project, but maybe it doesn't need the CDBG funds this year. Maybe it needs it 3 years from now, because maybe it's in the planning phases and won't be in construction for a while. That sort of thing is really important to keep in mind. Since we're a small city, we get a decent amount of money, but not a huge amount. So we'll probably have about $350,000 for activities for next year. We have program income coming in regularly from previous rehab loans, first-time home buyer loans, business loans. We're getting payments in all the time on those. And that's called program income. So program income also has to be considered within your consolidated plan and your annual action plan. Where are you going to spend that money? Since we've got an open grant with the state right now, I think our program income is going to stay under the state program for a little while, but in future years we'll definitely be adding the program income to that $350,000 a year. Right now, it depends on, it can vary, but right now we're getting about $100,000 a year in program income, so it's not an insignificant amount of money. So that's my presentation. And what I would love to know is if you have comments on groups or neighborhoods or issues that you would want to make sure that get addressed as we go through this process, or if there's any other information you'd like to see before we come back with you with the needs analysis.
Thank you for your
I do have one quick
presentation. Go ahead.
comment that relative to your outreach, if you haven't already considered, maybe consider outreach to faith-based organizations, because they tend to be a voice for those in the community that don't typically show up, especially low-income when it comes to low-income individuals and
Okay.
outreach.
Yeah, we'll make sure to pull something together for that. That's a good idea, and I think very very much I think supported by HUD for that sort of outreach. So,
Commissioner Price, do you have any comments?
Can you expand on the homeless outreach? You said there's a person now that does that activity.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that?
Ryan Collins was hired. Well, it was October last year, so it was almost a year ago. The city, last year, we participated in the Bridge to Housing program along with the county and the Yolo County Housing Authority, where we took 65 individuals off the river. They were camping on the river, put them in a motel for about 4 months. They got, every single one of them was assigned a case manager, so they got intensive case management services, and they had service providers daily coming into the motel working with these folks. Most of them got signed up for health benefits. A lot of them ended up receiving drug rehab programs or mental health assistance. About probably over a third ended up with a voucher from the Housing Authority. More than half ended up with permanent housing. So it was very expensive. I'm not sure we will do this exact model again because it was costly, not just for the city, but we split the money with the county, and then the Housing Authority provided a lot of staff for this. Aaron over here was very involved in it. So we had a number of people with the city and the police department and economic development and housing and all sorts of departments in the city that were involved. But Ryan Collins helped us with that program. We had just hired him when it got underway, and now he's continuing to do, now that we've got those folks kind of settled, continuing to do case management. And as I said, when someone gets a call about a person walking down the street that obviously needs some assistance, some help, he immediately goes, he can be called, he can go out and help folks. And a lot of times he'll go on runs with the police if there's a homeless person that's causing a problem or something like that. Because there should be alternatives other than just jail. Jail doesn't usually fix any of the things that are wrong in the situation. It just gets a person off the street for a day or two, and then they're right back on the street. So it can stop an immediate huge problem, but it doesn't do anything long term. And so having Ryan there that can help link that person up with services, talk to them, get them into rehab, or get them linked up, take them over to get them to a mental health treatment, that sort of thing, has been very valuable. So we have him funded through state CDBG funds right now for the next 2 years.
Thank you.
Commissioner White? Comments?
As you talk to business owners, I might suggest that the motel owners have their own association.
The Motel Owners Association,
Yeah, and they would be great to talk about the needs of the low-income people who live in their hotels.
Yeah, Ryan works a lot with those folks,
Yeah.
but I will put them on my list.
Okay,
Any other
Commissioner
questions?
Smith, you have more? Okay. Commissioner Esquivel?
Not at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Campbell?
I would have to use his, if you don't mind, to accommodate me to be
We
recorded.
have to share today.
Just a question on the goals. In order to sort of answer your first question, I'm wondering, can you tell me what the top 3 goals for the CDBG program will be for West Sac? Have you got to that point? Or
Not
is
at this time, because we need to go through this process, or, you know, what might be my goals might not be your goals, or the people that live in the lower income neighborhoods, they might not be their goals. So it's going to be a consensus building activity to come up with goals that work for the residents and for the general community in West Sacramento. As I said before, we did do some that really intensive study of the Washington neighborhood last year, so it would be, I would hope that would maybe be like a target area, since we know what it needs and we're working on a plan for developing that neighborhood. You know, it's always nice if you actually already got the plan done and you've really, they did an awful lot of outreach to the neighbors in that neighborhood, so it's already had a lot of input. So that's one thing I would definitely want to see considered, but I can't say off the top of my head right now because it's not my decision. It needs to be a consensus of the community.
So the consensus building will be to narrow down on the different program elements that CDBG focuses on or supports. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you've got housing, infrastructure, business loans. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to do all of them. We could do
Right.
one thing a year if we
But
wanted,
you're
or
in-
we can do 6 things a year if we wanted. It depends on when we look at the needs in West Sacramento and we look at the resources that are already there, so how can we capitalize on those resources? How can we take something that's already existing and maybe make it a little better just by adding a little bit of money rather than create something totally new? Sometimes you have to create something totally new, but that's always a lot more lengthy process and expensive process. So we're going to be looking at all those kinds of ideas. Where can our money be best spent to have impact on
So the
people's
question then
lives?
is, where might you not be aware of interested groups that would fit in each of those categories? So parks, you might have the sports programs in the community.
Yeah, we'll be
Certainly
addressing
have Parks
the,
and Rec from the
Yeah.
departments, the city staff.
we'll definitely be taking this information to the, Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Commission, because they deal with youth and senior activities in addition to recreational and park activities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, couple things. So does HUD have a public outreach process to a guideline or a structure?
It's very general. It just says you need to have a way to engage the low-income community.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a way to engage the business community, and you need to have a way of identifying both needs and existing resources. And then the only other things that are in the HUD regulations are 2 public hearings and that 30-day public comment period. Those are the only statutorily required things. So what our citizen participation plan says is, in general, we know you want us to talk to these groups, but our citizen participation plan says, and here's how we'll do that. So once we draft the citizen participation plan, that's got to go to HUD for their review, and HUD may come up with some additional things that they want to see in it.
Okay. Is so the identification and prioritization of the goals or the projects that are identified, what body really makes that final decision? Is that the city council?
The final decision, yes, would be city council.
Okay, so they're going to take.
So we take recommendations from the commissions.
Commissions, okay.
Yeah.
And then it would go, is the planning commission involved in that?
I don't have them on my list because it's not really a planning even though it's a planning document, it's not a traditional like planning commission type document. It has nothing to do with where anything is situated or what is built. It has to do with the needs of low-income residents and low-income neighborhoods and how we serve those needs. So we might take it to them just as an informational thing, but it's not really a planning commission type document per se.
Okay, so Mr. Laurel passed out the strategic plan when we came in this evening. So obviously that's going to play a part of this evaluation process, correct?
What was that he passed out?
The strategic plan.
Oh, well, yeah, and every year the city council develops updates that strategic plan with their goals for that year.
Right.
So that is going to play a part in the annual action plan, but a 5-year goal doesn't always fit within the city's annual strategic planning process. It should make sense within that context. But how the annual action plan is probably going to be closer to the city's strategic planning process. Okay. The annual action plan is what are we going to do with our money this year?
Right. So you can expect about $350,000 per year on this plan?
Yeah. I can't always guess what Congress is going to do. They have cut CDBG year after year for like the last 10 years. So, but hopefully we'll stay around 350.
Okay. And do you have seniors on your list there?
Yes.
I figured you probably would. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to ask is, you said it was funding at a last resort. So you really have to filter all this information and really get down to, there's a big matrix of analysis here, I would think, right?
There is, and it can get fairly complicated. We'll try and keep it as simple as we can and still be useful, because it is not supposed to ever supplant existing funding.
So is there going to be a party for the celebration of being an entitlement city?
There should. I've been here since 2004. When I was hired, I was told I was supposed to start preparing for entitlement because we were right around 36,000 in population, and this was 2004. Things were just going gangbusters, and we just thought for sure we were going to hit 50,000 within a couple of years. And thanks to the recession, it has taken a bit longer than we had anticipated, but there's maybe already been a little partying back in the office. We were, like I said, we have done well under the state program. The state program has given us a lot of money, and we've done a lot of good things with it. But it is always better to have control over where your money goes and how and what you put your money into, I think, for your community. So it's nice to be able to have that, and we'll be able to do this planning process and do what's best for West Sacramento.
Yeah, I think it also would be good to let the public know about this and through the chamber and other avenues we have, websites and that sort of thing. I mean, it's celebratory, I believe. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was part of a question. I was wondering, if I'm a citizen in Bright, Broderick, Southport, how am I going to know about this process? And I know you're in the initial phases of developing this, but just interested in outreach, marketing of that. So
we'll definitely put some information in the newsletter. That was one thing we had planned to do. We'll have probably a meeting, at least one meeting, with the Bright and Broderick Community Action Network, the BBCAN. They exist as a result of a CDBG activity in 2007 when we did a visioning on the north side of town for what those what those neighbors wanted their community to look like in the future. And some of them got so involved that they just decided to stop asking the city to fix their neighborhoods, and they thought they could do a better job themselves. So I think they've actually done a lot of good work on the north side of town. So they're definitely going to be one of our partners. But that was a state CDBG planning grant that we used for that. So CDBG funding is very, very flexible. It can be used in a lot of different ways, which is both its benefit and its drawback. It's also, like I said, sometimes the tendency is, well, let's do everything, and you can't do everything well. You need to kind of stay focused to make an impact and do real good. So if you have other organizations that you think that would also represent segments of the lower income neighborhoods, please let me know.
Okay, I think another one might be the Historic Society, if you haven't.
The Historical Society.
Okay. So thank you. Did you get good information from us, what you were looking for?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we're going to use you as a sounding board as we go through this process. So really appreciate you listening to me tonight, and start thinking about this, and we'll keep coming back and work through this process over the next 7-8 months.
Thank you, Ms. Collins.
Anything else?
Let's see, a couple things, housekeeping wise. That's all we have for our agenda, correct? Oh, okay, when do you want to do that as a part of the staff updates? You want to do that as part of your staff updates? Okay. So I had a couple of things. One is, let's see, Ms. Harris, our vice chair is Min Lee. You should probably say vice chair on there, on our agenda, or our head deal. The other thing is, we're at a point of request and comments from the commissioners. So if you have any at-large community observations or comments that you would like to bring forth in this commission. Okay, be thinking about that next time we get together too, because as you're out and about, you've got a platform here to be expressing ideas and observations. So it's an important opportunity.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to know year over year what we made. TBD Fest last year relative to this year. It's a big event coming up this weekend, and I'd like to see, what kind of actual economic activity it's generating in the city of West Sacramento.
Okay. That was, say that again?
The Bridge District
Oh.
event coming up this weekend.
Right.
As it continues to grow in popularity and a lot of economic activity for our city.
Do we have a meter on that?
Generally, no. Part of the challenge with an event like TBD in a community like this is we don't have a lot of the hotels and the restaurants in the vicinity of the event. So
It's going across.
our at least anecdotal analysis of last year was most of the people were coming from, or heading back towards Sacramento, which is great for, the region as a whole. And it's great marketing for the Bridge District. A lot of people saw the site. So I think the bigger benefit for the city is going to be more the long-term presence of having it there, getting people excited about the possibilities there. But in terms of economic activity that generates revenue for the city, we haven't really tracked it, and the guess would be it wouldn't be that significant at this stage. But down the road, I think we'll definitely be more interested in once we have a more built environment there, what it's doing. So.
Thank you.
But I can try to, put something together once we get a download from the event this weekend. We can try to do some analysis of attendance and, just where we saw people coming from and where we saw them going to afterwards. So, and the hotels, we can always check in with our hotels to see, like the Hampton Inns and those sorts of, the few that we have here to see if they saw an uptick in business. So I'm sure they will. So.
We have a groundbreaking ceremony coming up too, right?
For Village Parkway? You do. So hopefully you got the invite. If you haven't, maybe Polly, I know, is coordinating on behalf of City Manager's Office on that. So Village Parkway is the roadway that will connect from the McGowan Bridge, which was recently completed, at the end of South River Road. Right now, you go across that bridge, and it appears to go nowhere. But it does actually go back to Jefferson. But eventually, Village Parkway will connect from that point down to Stonegate. So it really does two things. One, if you live on that side of Jefferson, it's a huge relief valve, having another option to head up the riverfront to get to downtown and elsewhere. But as the economic development guy, the more important thing is probably that it creates a nice backbone piece of infrastructure in that Stone Log property that we own, or actually the port will own it pretty soon. It's going to be key to the development of that site in the future. So we're really excited about it for both of those reasons.
Okay, good.
And it's next Friday, the 18th, or this Friday.
It's this Friday,
This
right?
Friday.
Yeah, 18th.
My date's all messed up.
At 10
and I think
o'clock.
it's at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Yeah, and it's just out at the site at the foot of the bridge, I believe. So,
Right.
and you're all encouraged to attend if you can.
While you're at the podium, do you want to go over this?
Sure, yeah, I didn't want to leave you with this, and it's a lot to digest, but hopefully you're at least familiar with the process that the city council goes through. The strategic plan, I really credit the process and not so much the document itself, but just the fact that the council gets together every year and does this and looks out on a 15-year horizon for a lot of the success the city's enjoyed. We have great leadership here, great community support, but the foundation of it all is having the really strategic drive to everything that we do. So just in terms of format of how this is organized, if you're not familiar with it, we have what we call the vision of the next 15 years, Vision 2030. There's a list of principles that you can read here, and they each have a letter and different sub-objectives under them, so you can look and kind of see a lot of things tie together in terms of the focus of a lot of our priorities. So there's principles A through I, and those tie into the goals for the next 5 years. Those haven't changed in a long time. I think since I've been at the city, those principles and those goals have remained the same. But what those do is they feed into the annual planning process the council goes through that results in our annual strategic plan, which you can see it right there, but it's also on page 17 of this document. And as commissioners, that's probably the most relevant thing that you'll be dealing with. Every time we bring an item to you, it typically ties back to the annual strategic plan. And I can't remember, I don't think I've done it for this group yet. We did it for the old Economic Development Commission. But a little bit of a rundown on the strategic plan, just in terms of what you'll be expecting to see in the near future. I can tell you that our division is responsible for many of these items. We're either the primary or the secondary. Those that include the streetcar project, and now I'm on page 17 of this document. The Washington Sustainable Communities Plan implementation. Innovative and new revenue sources is sort of a vague term for things like we have a parking program that we're working on developing in the urban areas that will generate revenue. We're looking at things like electronic billboards and that sort of thing. So it's part of just kind of growing up as a bigger city, how we can come up with new innovative revenue sources for that. The Community Investment Action Plan you've heard me talk about before. We're still in the process of implementing it. It's kind of our post-redevelopment plan for economic development. Involves financing and real estate. The long-term capital financing strategy, we're also, I think, a secondary responsibility. And that really has to do with how do we pay for all this, mega slate of projects that we have with all of our bridges and streetcar and other funding needs. The Pioneer Bluff Transition Plan, I believe you received a presentation on that at your last meeting, if you're familiar with that. Urban farms, we're still sort of the designated division in the city on that, and all we do is try to link property owners with potential farmers of that program. The food hub activities is really our strategy for going out and attracting additional food-related companies to the city, keeping that effort going. The barn construction is the project that hopefully you're all familiar with in the Bridge District that is under construction now. The city has a financial stake in that project. The Delta Lane project Louise talked about earlier, the first phase is under construction. Our division will continue to work on that and also potentially on the second phase. And the last one that we have direct involvement is the Broadband Infrastructure Action Plan, which for Michael, he was the only holdover from EDAC. EDAC had a lot of involvement on the development of that plan. So this process starts in November with the exec team retreat. What we do is we put together ideas and issues for the council to consider. The council gets together usually in January, kind of later in the month in January, and it's usually a 3-day retreat. Lyle, guy on the front cover here, flies in from Florida and does this really amazing, kind of facilitation of the council. And it's really a unique process and interesting to see. And the product of that process is the annual strategic plan that gets updated and followed very closely by staff. Just the distinction between, if you're curious, between policy agenda items and management agenda items. The ones on the policy agenda are considered items where the council still has to weigh in on policy direction. So it's sort of at that level, whereas the management agenda is intended to be things that they've given us sufficient direction, we know what we're supposed to go do, and now we're in the implementation process. So the line on that isn't always that distinct, but generally that's how the plan's organized. So if you have any questions, I can take them at this time, and like I've said before, you're always free to follow up with me through email or just give me a call anytime. So any questions on this?
Commissioners? Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask where you stand with the capital financing strategy. I mean, obviously that's...
Yeah, it's a big deal. We've actually made a lot of progress. Yeah. So on a couple fronts, one, the item that you're very familiar with, our effort to create enhanced infrastructure financing districts as new tax increment financing, a financing tool to help fund capital projects. So that's a long-winded way of basically saying we're able to now to capture property tax increases from certain districts and put that towards projects, and that's fundamental to our ability to do these major projects. So that's in the works. We're working on a citywide plan for those EIFDs. We also have received direction from the City Council. The main component of that plan is taking the Measure V sales tax revenue that was adopted at least a few years ago, and finding a mechanism to be able to bond against that revenue to fund the streetcar project, our portion of it, and the Southport early implementation flood improvement project. So we're next step on that. We're going out to the market to issue bonds, and so not sure exactly what the status is, but I would anticipate you'll hear more on that towards the end of the year, definitely in the next year, and we'll have all the money we need to pay for streetcar and flood. Now, Broadway Bridge, I Street Bridge, other major infrastructure projects, those are going to be dependent on grant funds, the EIFD. So the important thing is we're on top of the cost side. We have good projections on what it's going to take, and now we're just trying to tie that and prioritize it with the funding side of the equation. So it's going. I'd say it's going well for considering the magnitude of that task that we have. So anything else?
Commissioners, thank you.
All right, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
And our next meeting is December 9th. It got pushed back, because otherwise you'd be here the day before Thanksgiving, so.
December 9th?
December 9th.
Okay. Then, let's see, any other calendar events, any other calendar notes on that? Okay. I'd like to take just 3 minutes, maybe less, and have our commissioners just introduce themselves, because we have not everyone was here at one time, and we could just, kind of get acquainted a little bit. So, let's see, let's start with Commissioner Price.
How much of an introduction do you want?
30 seconds.
Pardon?
30 seconds.
Ron Price. I live in the Ironworks development, so I'm close to the development that's going on in the Bridge District. It used to be called the Triangle. I'm a project manager for a construction management company, and I've been in the construction industry for 40 years now. Personal relationship with the chief building official because of my profession, and the mayor used to be my neighbor. Moved away. That's how I got involved in this process.
Good, thank you. Commissioner White.
I'm Chris White. I've lived in Southport in the same house for 25 years. I am the communications director at the California Fuel Cell Partnership, where we work on hydrogen-powered fuel cell cars. And I'm also with Capital Bowl, recipient of a CDB block grant loan, and second vice chair of the WESEC Chamber of Commerce, and I help put on the farmers market every week.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Smith.
I'm Veronica Smith. I reside in Harriet Lane condominiums. I work for the City of Sacramento Economic Development Department and have been in the economic development arena for the past 12 years.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell. Campbell?
I'm loud enough you can hear me. My name's Mark Campbell. I live in the Rivers community. I've been there for 10 years now. I like to qualify that by saying in the non-gated part. I have twin boys, very active participants in the Little League baseball program, coached in that for several years. Work for the state treasurer. I'm the executive director of a not a financing commission, but a program that provides education and research and policy for local governments throughout the state on finance.
Good, thank you. I see Commissioner Esquivel.
Nick Esquivel. I've lived in West Sacramento for about 2.5 years now, Southport. I work for the state of California, California Community College Chancellor's Office in the Workforce and Economic Development Division, primarily working on apprenticeships and career type of education, vocational education initiatives.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Michael Brady, architect, and I've been a resident of West Sac for 13 years now. Been on the EDH Commission for about 10 of those years, so I'm bumping up against an anniversary in a party, right? So I had my business here in West Sac, but I joined another firm here recently, and so I'm across the river during the day, and then I come home to West Sac. So I participate in Rotary and the Chamber, been an ambassador for a few years, and I was on the Chamber board for a while. So that's my stick. So I just thought it'd be a good idea if we had a little bit of background on everybody, just kind of get acquainted a little bit. Anything else we have?
I have one thing I wanted to say that, okay, anyway, I'm out of turn on this. Over the weekend, my grandson came down from Tahoe and participated in the Code for Youth hackathon that was across the street. That was such an amazing program where for 2.5 days, kids got the opportunity to learn some really tangible skills that aren't taught in school. And they started by learning agile development and rapid prototyping. Then they got to take classes in different programming languages or working with robotics, and then put a project together at the end. And the response from the community was just incredible. The kids just ate it up, and my grandson, after spending the entire day working on computers, would come home and sat up the first night until midnight finishing writing JavaScript code at 12. And in talking to some of the Hacker Lab folks, I learned that their space downtown, they are out of space. The program has grown so large that they need a bigger place to live. And if we, as a city and an economic development committee, could help them move to West Sacramento, I could see a big benefit for that all the way around. So.
And the name is Hackers?
They call it the Hacker Lab.
It's
Lab,
actually
Hacker Lab.
It's actually Code for Hood. It's a separate entity. I just happen to be a board member of both Code for Hood and Hacker Lab. So Hacker Lab is the for-profit side, and Code for Hood is the non-profit side. And Councilmember Johansson is on the Hacker Lab board as well, and very supportive. So thanks, West Sac, for making that happen.
It was amazing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. That was very good. Okay, so we are adjourned. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.